I'm gonna go in the store and grab something. All right, I'll be out in
All
like
right.
2 minutes.
Yo, yo, yo. That impromptu thing. But once again, it is once again it is the crossover podcast. Rocking out with Trey, who's in the rocking out with Trey. Uh Matt's coming in a little bit later, but rocking out with Trey on this edition of the crossover podcast. Uh Trey, why don't you introduce yourself if you're available? You might be at the store.
No, the store was closed, so I'm here. 'Cause, I'm on the way home from a church. I was on the way home from a revival at another church. But yeah, man, I'm looking forward to this podcast. We got some good topics.
Cool, man. Cool. Cool. So rocking out. You good, Trey? Oh, there goes the other store. Rocking out with rocking out with these topics today. As we get ready. Excuse the background noise. That's the rain. It's raining over here. But uh, as we always start off, we're gonna start with our crossover hot takes. And I guess we'll start with the sports topic before we uh before we dive into the political or pop culture topic, as we always start this off. So Trey, with a sweep in the first round, ruined Russell Westbrook's season. Take off on that. Trey, you there? Oh, oh, something happened to Trey. But as always, I'll start it off then. I don't think a sweep in the first round would. Oh, there you
All right, I'm back, guys. Sorry, my phone disconnected. But go ahead and repeat that question for me, Kylan. I missed what you were saying. My phone was chopping up.
Oh, my bad. I said with a sweep in the first round ruin Russell Westbrook's season if they got swept or if they only won one game. Do you think that would ruin Russell Westbrook's season?
Well, if you guys listen, if everybody listens to the podcast, who I think the MVP is. For me, my MVP is James Harden. So, um,
I'm not jealous, Sarah. I said don't be.
so yes and no to that. Um, is it possible that he can win the MVP? Yeah. Uh, but like I said, my better than Russell Westbrook's team. You know, they're up 2-0 right now, and I think they're playing. Are they playing? I'm not sure if they're playing tonight or whatever. But um, as of now, James Harden has the better team, and although Russell Westbrook is putting up, these historic numbers, it's not enough. And um, we saw last night, we saw LeBron lead, Cleveland back from a 26 point deficit, and it was a historic comeback. When James Harden is doing his thing, so I mean, it's like, to me, I how do I want to put this? Is Russ out of the MVP race? No, not by any means. Just because of the numbers that he's putting up, and the fact that he did bring his team to the playoffs. But like I said before in previous podcasts, what matters more, stats or wins? And in this case, especially in the playoffs, because that's his ultimate goal is to win a championship, wins matter more than putting up a triple double. And this topic of whether or not stats matter to Russell Westbrook has come up multiple times. And in recent memory, I think it was either earlier today or last night, he was asked a question about his stats, and I can't say exactly what he said, but he essentially said, I don't care about stats. And to me, I mean, if Russell Westbrook is supposedly, the best point guard in the league or best guard in the league or whatever, top three in the league in terms of guards, should he not be able to do something with the talent he has? I mean, it's not like he's got bums on his team. Now his team is not great, but he's got guys like Victor Oladipo, Enes Kanter, and Steven Adams coming off, and they do their thing, right? It's not like he's got bums. He's not playing with a bunch of bums. And for whatever reason, and I could be wrong, to me it seems like what Russell is doing, the triple doubles don't equal wins because it's not necessarily what the team needs to win. It's not the right formula. It's almost like there's an equation. It's like triple doubles plus Victor Oladipo, Enes Kanter, and Steven Adams, and then there's a does not equal championship. And I think although it's great to see what Russ does, but at the same time, it's clear that although it was good enough to get to the playoffs, as of now, it's not good enough to even win a first round series, against the Houston Rockets, who are the third seed. So to me, James Harden is still the MVP solely because not only is he putting up similar stats as Russell Westbrook, but he's also beating Russell Westbrook with, I hand it to the Houston Rockets. They probably have a better set of talent, but come on. You got two of the best guards in the league going up against each other. And clearly right now, James Harden is winning out. And not only is he winning out in the playoff series, he's winning out in the MVP race as of now.
Well, as Trey said, if you've been paying attention to the past podcast, for me, I like Russell Westbrook, but he's too much of a turnover machine for me. And unfortunately for him, what's doing them in the last two games. Well, the first game was his turnovers. This game was the fact that, he couldn't stop himself from taking bad shots. He shot the ball 43 times. He's putting up historic numbers. But when you shoot the ball 43 times and the Rockets are basically making you take bad shots, when you miss, when you get tired and you miss Doug McDermott wide open in the corner for a 3-pointer that would have cut the lead to like 6 points. It would have kept you in the game. I mean, he doesn't really have a lot of talent outside of Enes Kanter, consistent talent. Victor Oladipo is good, but he's not consistent. It's just some people would say this proves that Russell Westbrook is the MVP because he took a team that I've said before was built for Kevin Durant. He took a Kevin Durant built team to the playoffs and probably not going to get past the first round. We'll probably end up getting swept. Depending on what happens tonight, they might either get swept or lose in 5 games. Because obviously the Rockets are the better team. Before LeBron James let his team back down by 20 points, James Harden let his team back down by 20 points. That was with Russell Westbrook off the floor, but it still counts. As Russell Westbrook, this is why I brought the topic up last week that they really should wait and account for playoffs when they do, the MVP because I know the MVP is a regular season award, but I think in the playoffs the award is validated. In the regular season, you put up your numbers and separates the men from the boys. Right now Russell Westbrook had a very good game last. Stat wise, he had a good game. 51 points, he had a triple double. He did everything except for in the fourth quarter be able to pass the ball and have a teammate get a good shot. When you go, what was it? 2 for 14 or whatever it was in the fourth quarter, you're bound to lose that game, especially when you're taking bad shots, you're gunning the ball. Excuse the background. As I said, we're in the middle of a thunderstorm right now, so I'm podcasting in a thunderstorm. But you have all this stuff going on, and Russell Westbrook, will it, if they lose, will it devalue his season? Kind of, sort of, because it's like, you put up all those numbers, you had the record, your team needs you to get a triple double in order to stay in games and stuff. And it does. What I'm about to say may, like, some people may say, oh, you're contradicting yourself. It does add to his value, but you can't be the most valuable player to me if you're not at least, if your team doesn't go deep into the playoffs. All those regular season numbers are great, but they really don't mean anything if you don't go past the first round of the playoffs. And I'm being serious. Like, the last MVP to win an MVP and not go further than the first round was Dirk Nowitzki. Nobody remembers that year that Dirk Nowitzki was the MVP and his high-powered Dallas Mavericks lost to Baron Davis, Stephen Davis, and those high-powered FC, the Golden State Warriors. That's what Russell Westbrook's up against. Now his team is not a number one seed, but his team definitely overachieved because of him. This is reminiscent of when LeBron James took a bunch of bums to the finals and then they wound up getting swept by San Antonio. Now, does that mean OKC will get swept? They have yet to play. They play tonight. We'll see what happens tonight. But if they wind up losing this game and getting swept, Russell Westbrook, even if he gets his MVP, he better demand they get some more help. That OKC stop trading away valuable pieces. And, it also kind of validates, his game really validates what Kevin Durant said. When Kevin Durant basically said that, I like Russell Westbrook, his game is good, but he's a ball hog. And, shooting the ball 43 times, no matter who's on your team, validates the fact that you're a ball hog. Trey, I'm going to let you get back in.
I'll say this. The funny about Russell Westbrook is, like, I think I said this before when I was talking about Russell Westbrook and, like, whether stats or not matter. If you play,
You're talking to me?
If you play 2K,
I don't.
Like, for example, my player, I'll try to do as much as I can. So I'll try to get triple double. So I get whatever, all the triple double, whatever. But usually what ends up happening is I'll turn the ball over like 7 or 8 times, and usually those 7 or 8 turnovers are what will cause the team to lose. And I mean, that's exactly what happens with Russell Westbrook. I agree that his team is overachieved, partially because of his play. His team is also underachieved due to his, the fact that he's somewhat of a turnover machine. So that that's why they're a 6 seed and not a 1 seed or a 2 seed. And I think you can compare Russell Westbrook's situation to LeBron when he was in Cleveland the first time, but I think he's got a little bit better talent around him. Victor Oladipo was I think he was top 5 pick. And his Cantor is really good. He's a very, very good player. And Steven Adams is a very good player. So, and they'd probably be starters or 6 men on any other team. So I think it's a completely different situation from LeBron in Cleveland for the first time, but that's another topic. I mean, that's just my view on Russell Westbrook. You know, he's not, as of now, he's not the MVP. That could change if somehow, you know, they end up winning the series or, you know, pushing this to 7 games and really doing some big thing, you know. So, I mean, but that's how it is.
I understand, but you know, I fully understand that Victor Oladipo and Steven Adams are, you know, good talent, probably better talent than LeBron ever had his first time in Cleveland. But you know, they're too inconsistent. They're not consistent enough. They're good. Now with Kevin Durant, now when they had the fully powered Thunder last year, the ones that pushed you know, the Warriors to 7 games, the one that almost beat the Warriors, that's because they had 2 superstars who you had to watch. Now you just have Russell Westbrook, and you know, he puts up ungodly numbers and everything else. He's a good player. Don't get me wrong, good, fantastic player. Just turns the ball over way too much. You know, the team has overachieved because of him, and ultimately, you know, he can look back on this as sort of like to compare it to another player that overachieved and whose teams, you know, he took a team places, but ultimately had some disgraceful exits in the playoffs. Peyton Manning. Now, does Russell Westbrook compare to Peyton Manning in any way other than numbers right now? Probably not, and it's 2 different sports. But you know, it's a fairly comparable thing where Peyton Manning would have really, really good individual seasons and then wound up getting bounced early in the playoffs. You know, it's a regular it's very reminiscent, and you know, Russell Westbrook is a great player. I really hope that for their sake, his team does not get swept. It looks like it may happen though. But like I said, they have a game to play tonight on ESPN2 at 10:30. There's your shameless plug, not paid by ESPN in any way, free advertisement. But you know, you have, you know, it's going to be a great series. Right now, as Trey said, James Harden has the better team. Mike D'Antoni, for once in his life, is the better coach. The style out there that you could say that about D'Antoni coach team, that D'Antoni is the better coach of the situation. And so you have all that. And, you know, Russell Westbrook is basically overachieving. And it's great that he's overachieving, but, you know, he's not going to be the first great player that takes a team that shouldn't be there somewhere where they shouldn't be. And, you know, ultimately, it's up to his team and his coaches and Billy Donovan to, you know, I know Trey's a big Florida Gator fan, so it's up to Billy Donovan to make the adjustments that'll help the Thunder either push it to 7 or keep their season alive for five games. You know, ultimately it's up to Billy Donovan, Russell Westbrook, and the Thunder to not get swept. And it's looking like they might get swept. So, you know, a lot of that is yet to be determined, but we shall see what happens. So we're going to move right along to a recurring theme on this podcast in the past few weeks. Our president, Mr. Donald Trump, and the question on the floor for Trey to answer, for all of y'all, for both of us to answer, and for you guys to ponder, is Donald Trump about to set off World War III with his recklessness? Go ahead, Trey.
I mean, I can't say for sure, yeah, because I mean, nobody knows. Are we seeing signs of something that could turn into a war? Definitely. I mean, you know, we both said it before, you know, that that somebody needs to take his Twitter account away because, I mean, it's almost like he's a little child. The way it's like the way he treats his Twitter account or his social media. It's like, are you a child? Like, what in the world is going on? You know, we've got just his lack of knowledge about the other countries that would potentially be involved in in a potential war. I watched a video yesterday. He was being interviewed about on Easter Sunday about somebody asked him a question about a situation with North Korea, and he called. He said he speaks of this. He says this gentleman. And before in past interviews, he had said North Korea needs to behave, and you're like, okay, who is he talking when he's mentioning this gentleman? Who is he talking about? And it was clear that he didn't know who Kim Jong-un was and was lumping him together with his father. So it's like, okay, that's one concern there.
Where are you?
And then you got this whole Russia thing, this
I don't think it will be in there.
relationship that Trump has with Russia and that his campaign had with Russia. You've got the relationship with North Korea. We've got everything in Syria going on. The bomb, the missiles that we're firing. North Korea is, they're like, they're threatening us, and Trump goes on Twitter and is like, not acting like a child, instead of working things out and being diplomatic about things. So is there a potential for war? Definitely, yeah. I mean, these are signs of war, stuff like this. And to me, we are kind of in a war already. Forcibly though, I mean, we kind of pushed ourselves into this, pushed our way into the situation in Syria by bombing, sending the bombs over there. But what more scares me the most really is not even necessarily. I mean, the fact that there could be a war scares me because you and I, Kylan, are both eligible to be selected in a draft. So, and that's not something that I want to do right now. Kylan, you got things going for you with this whole journalism thing, the podcast, and all this stuff. I'm in school. I got things going for me in terms of that, and I'm not interested in being in a war right now. So I mean, that's my thoughts on it. Like, it could potentially be a war. It could just blow over. But if it is a war, I'm a little worried because I'm eligible to be in that war and fight in the war. So.
Okay, this is why, and obviously it's true. We have some. Yeah, obviously, we have some interesting things going on in our lives right now. We're all both in our 20s, and can be eligible to be drafted. I totally forgot about that. To be honest, if there was a draft, I totally forgot. Thanks for reminding me. But another reason that I don't really like the recklessness of our president. Now, going along with that, this is why you don't pick people who are not astute in world history. Yeah, let's go with that. That's a good term for it. Astute in world history enough to know that you don't do certain things, and you might set off war. You might set off a war. Now, Donald Trump, he's very reckless. Last week he was very reckless in his language as well. Now, this is probably 50-50, 50% blame on the Pentagon, 50% blame on Donald Trump and his communication office for saying things that stoked fire. So this is why you don't pick people that are unpredictable. Some people say Donald Trump was unpredictable. That's why I voted for him. This is why you don't elect unpredictable people into the highest office in the world. Donald Trump with one sentence yesterday, with one sentence last week, put China on high alert. Now China's scrambling jets, Russia's scrambling jets, and saying we're closing our borders just in case Donald Trump actually fires some missiles in North Korea. China's actually being the voice of reason, saying Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un should come to the table and not try to start a war that will ultimately end up in World War III. Like, this is why you don't put unpredictable people who are reckless in their language into different things. Now he's stoking flames with Iran too. Yet another reason you don't stoke unpredictability. But let's stay with North Korea. Let's talk about the latest gap. The one where you're saying I have an armada coming. My man, armada? Really? You don't say armada in the modern times, man. That's just like basically saying my ships. That you basically should have said my ships have missiles loaded and we're ready to fire at North Korea, because it's basically the same thing. When you say an armada is coming to North Korea to set things off in that region, the second most volatile region in the world, that part of Asia, because you got a 24. A lot of people forget that Kim Jong-un is only 22, 23 years old. This is a literal young adult battling with an old man. Now, I know we call Donald Trump a child, but in retrospect, that's an insult to children. Because Trey comes from a big family, so I'm gonna use his youngest siblings as an example. I'm pretty sure your youngest sister, Trey, can run this country, and I think I've said this on this podcast before. I really do think Sarah can run this. Sarah can run this country way better than Donald Trump, and she's only 5, 5 or 6 in the first grade. She can run this country better than Donald Trump. It's an insult to children. Donald Trump is Donald Trump. We shouldn't even call him a child. It's an insult to children. Because even children know better. Children will test. Children will test you, right? But no child with all this power will be all like, you know what? I'm gonna use reckless language. I'm a let the generals, who, by the way, he's supposed to be smarter than the generals, right? I'm gonna let the generals decide where we're gonna fire missiles. They don't even have to ask me. They can just fire missiles. So basically, you're giving war hawks. Most of the people in Trump's chief of what you call that? Trey, help me out. What's the general? The Joint Chiefs of Staff are war hawks. They're people that are notable war hawks. Our Secretary of Defense, George Mad Dog Mathis. Mad Dog. Why anybody would give somebody with the nickname Mad Dog power is beyond me. But listen, he's a war hawk. He wants to start war with Iran. North Korea is just his opening salvo to what he actually wants to do. And you're giving these people unpredictable power. And you are basically somebody who's ignorant of world history. The president of China had to educate you on what he could actually do to stop North Korea, because you don't understand the history of this world. You don't understand the economics. It's like you've never opened. Excuse me. It's like he never opened the world history book until he became president. My goodness. I don't understand, and I wish, I pray, I hope that he will become more wise. But it seems like my prayers are probably the world's prayers are just basically, it's just like nothing's changed. We've been praying that he become more wise, he get more mature. He's going on 100 days in office next week, and he's still the same old reckless Donald Trump that he was when he started. I just can't. And the thought of a war with North Korea that wind up getting us involved with Russia, because Russia's been flying over Alaska 4 times this week. Don't forget that. While we've been distracted with North Korea, Russia's been flying over Alaska 4 times this week, right? And you have Russian planes, but for those who didn't get it, it took me literally that Russia was flying over Alaska. Russia was flying planes over Alaska 4 times this week, and you have all that, and a reckless man running this world. So I'll go with my opening point. Will this lead to World War III? I don't know. I hope it doesn't, because I'm not trying to be drafted. So But this is why elections have consequences. This is why you should do your research. This is why he needs to be a one-term president. We can't go through more than 4 years of this. I can barely stand the 3 months that he's been in office. 3 months. Yeah, 3 months. 3 to 4 months he's been in office. Trey, I'm gonna let you get back in.
It's. I want to say one last thing though. It's funny that we're talking about war and bombs being and missiles being scrambled and jets being scrambled and all this crazy stuff. Because as I'm sitting there listening to you talk, Colin, the emergency testing system came on the TV, and I'm like, oh Lord. For a second, I thought it was real. Um, but yeah, it's like it's funny that we can't even call Donald Trump a child because so a lot of times you think about children, you think about humility, and Donald Trump is far from that. uh, there when we say Donald Trump is a child, we're more meaning the idea that Donald Trump is acting like a child is he's being childish, he's being immature is the word to use. And no, he's not astute in world history, or at least he does. At least he's acting as if he doesn't. He's not astute in world history, which is a shame because he's the president of the United States, and you would think that even if when he became president he wasn't astute, that he would make an attempt to become astute, so that when he's interviewed and people ask him questions about things, he can provide a semi-educated answer, and so that he won't do things that could potentially start a world war, which I don't even think he wants to be a part of. But because he's so uneducated and non-astute and anything but business, that's where we're headed, unfortunately. Hopefully it does not happen, but I'm not afraid. Well, because if there is a world war, hey, it's all in God's hands. So
Hey, I like that.
whatever.
I like that. I like that.
It is true. It is true. True words have never been spoken. But as I said, I really am not trying to get drafted, even though I think that there's enough people in our army to stay off a draft at least for the first 2 or 3 years. Hopefully we don't have a war, but I think that there's enough people that in the they've racked up the things. Now they're saying women can be drafted and everything. So, we all have a stake in no war happening anytime soon. But Donald Trump is Donald Trump. That's why we pray for our leaders. This is why we hope that America makes good decisions when it comes to leadership. And final point, and then we'll move on. Kind of makes you appreciate our previous presidents that we've had in our lifetimes. Uh, you know, uh, President Obama, even President George W. Bush. At least with him, President Bush, President Clinton, President Obama. I'm going through all the ones I lived through. So President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton. At least with those three, other than Bush, Bush was the most reckless one. But even he wasn't as reckless as Donald Trump. Makes me appreciate the three previous presidents I lived through, and that at least when they were reckless, you know, they weren't as reckless to a point of bringing another world war, making it close to happen. They weren't reckless with their words. Now George W. Bush was reckless with the force he used in Iraq. They all had their faults. President Obama used way too many drone strikes and everything, but he didn't want to put boots on the ground after the Iraq and Afghanistan war. But they still can buy. We're not as reckless with words and missiles as Donald Trump. And I just really want them Y'all need to be praying. We need to be making sure that, we're encouraging Donald Trump to be wise and not be stupid. It might be too late, but it's never too late. Like Trey says, all in God's hands, but it's never too late to hope that man don't start World War III. Because right now it doesn't seem like I said, we have a 23-year-old with nothing to lose, who's in one of the poorest, who runs one of the poorest countries in the world, and is backed up by Chinese and Russia, Well, not so much China, but Russia. And you have the worst kind of president right now. And I'm not saying this because of Donald Trump. I'm saying you have the worst kind of president right now because this is a president with low approval numbers who needs something to get his approval numbers up. Will basically do anything to get his approval numbers up. And that's the worst kind of thing to have. You got two leaders, one with nothing to lose and one with everything to gain. And that is a very bad combination. And that's what could ultimately start World War III. Donald Trump looking for anything to raise those approval numbers up, and Kim Jong-un with literally nothing to lose. So we're gonna move on to a curveball topic that didn't list, and should surprise both of us because I totally forgot about this to put it on the list to talk about. But I'm sure Trey expected it. We're gonna talk about Aaron Hernandez and his suicide. And our thoughts on that. Go ahead, Trey.
The brightness is.
I'm sorry, Colin. Go repeat. Tell me that question again.
Just on Aaron Hernandez and his suicide. Your thoughts?
Oh, wow. Whew, suicide, man. I don't know if anybody listening to this has seen 13 Reasons Why, but suicide has been on my mind lately because I finished watching that I think last week. But I literally woke up. They found him, I guess, yesterday night, or excuse me, 2 nights ago, and I woke up or whatever, and I looked at my phone and I got the notification from ESPN. Aaron Hernandez found in cell dead, and they claimed that it was a suicide. So to me, my sympathy goes out to his family, especially his daughter. His daughter's only 4, as well as to the family of at least the person who he was convicted of murdering, the Lloyd family. But at the same time, it's like, okay, we've got a convicted murderer who potentially killed more people than, who he was actually convicted of murdering, and got the life sentence for. But it's not right to rejoice in someone's death. I don't know why, if it's true that he did commit suicide, I don't know why he killed himself. I can't claim to know. But I can imagine that maybe in his head, maybe he felt remorse. Maybe he felt that, he has a life sentence and that his life is over in that sense. And so maybe he felt hopeless and decided that it was best that he ended early. I've heard that in Massachusetts that there's a law that says if you died, while being on trial, or you're supposed to be putting on trial, that your sentence is voided, and therefore, if his sentence is voided, the $14 or $15 million that he would have gotten from the Patriots, he now would be able to pass on to his daughter. So there's a number of things, in play there. But suicide is a serious issue. I don't know why he committed suicide. We can only speculate, and it's although it was not clear during the original trial when he was convicted of the double murder that he showed any remorse. It's not our, it's not our right to put judgment on him in that sense by saying, oh, he deserved to die in that way or commit suicide and hang himself, because I don't think that's right. Maybe he did deserve to die. I mean, I deserve to die too, but yeah, it's a tragic situation regardless of what he's done, and it's not something easy, especially, I mean, I don't know if, I'm not sure if he was married or had a girlfriend or whatever, whoever the mother of his child is. I don't know how she's feeling and the rest of his family is feeling. And I'm sure that on the other end, the family of the Lloyd family, they're probably now in a situation where they feel like he didn't necessarily, he killed himself, but they maybe don't feel that he served justice, the justice that was doing, which was a life in prison. But it all just comes down to the fact that he's dead and he committed suicide. And the question is, where did he go when he died? And we don't know. But it's a tragic situation nonetheless.
Whew, suicide is a horrible thing. Now, I come to you as a person who has not watched 13 Reasons Why, 13 Things Why, 13 Reasons Why. Actually, I'm pretty behind on all things Netflix. I still have yet to see Iron Fist and anything good on Netflix right now. So I'm behind on everything pop culture wise right now. So, my experience with suicide is just that I had to actually talk a friend down from committing suicide when I was younger. So with that experience in my belt, under my belt, it's a tragic, as Trey said, it's a tragic situation. I've always said that suicide, terrible thing. Suicide says a lot more. It says a couple of things, right? It speaks to a person's mindset at the time, and then it also speaks to, what the ultimately what people should ask with suicide. This is a question that often gets lost. We often focus on the why or the how instead of the what of suicide, as far as what led a person to commit suicide. Why is that? Now, Hernandez, like you said, he he just got, basically, he was doing life anyway, but he got off for murdering two other people in 2012. He was acquitted for that. He still was going to be, doing life for killing Mr. Lloyd. Aaron Hernandez is a tragic figure for a couple of reasons. One is because he had all that talent and decided to be a gangster instead of honing his craft on the football field and trying to be the best man he could be. He fell in with the wrong crowd. He gave into the gangster mentality. And, it's sad what happened to him, and ultimately him hanging himself. Was ultimately the fact of where he was at the time, that even though he was acquitted, he never really found peace, because ultimately he was still going to be in prison for the rest of his life. And as Trey said, I feel for his 4-year-old daughter who, only really got to know her father for maybe 3 years, because most of the time, the rest of her life, he's been in jail for the things that he did. And, it's like I said, it's a horrible thing. I definitely feel that, if nothing else, I think they said in the NFL, if nothing else, from the reports I'm hearing, they can pay parts of his salary, so $3.5 million to his daughter for a fund and something. And I think they should do that. I think the Patriots and the NFL, even though it had nothing to do with football as of yet, his brain is being donated for study, and so we will see if one of the reasons he committed suicide, and maybe one of the reasons why there's no defense for murder, but possible defense for him could be if they find the fact that he has CTE, which because he played football, I'm just going to say it's a given that he probably did suffer from CTE. And they'll probably use that as to why he committed suicide, why he killed those people, and everything else. And it's not a defense, but some people will say that he suffered from so much mental deformity that he thought that committing suicide and being a gangster was the only way to be, right? And that's just speculation on my part, but it's a sad. The case of Aaron Hernandez is sad. It ultimately leads to what do we value as a society, because we loved him for being on the field, and then we find out that Aaron Hernandez, the player, was way different from Aaron Hernandez, the man. And Aaron Hernandez, the man, as I think they said, Tim Tebow said that a lot of people, even in his days at Florida, thought that, I think the quote was, and I'm going to butcher it, and I think the quote was that, Aaron Hernandez will either end up a champion or end up in jail. And ultimately, he wound up doing both in his life. He wound up winning a Super Bowl, being a champion, and ultimately wound up in jail because of all the decisions he made. And ultimately, just shows that not only it is the Lloyd family suffering from a decision that Mr. Hernandez made, but also his daughter. His daughter will never know what it's like to have a father now. Because of, like I said, the decision that he made to take his life, and the decision he made to kill those people. It's a very tragic story, and suicide is not nothing to be taken lightly. It's one of the things that That's why I said I think that mental health is something that should be taken seriously. It's not something that just can be prayed away. We as Christians, we like to say that, God heals all and everything. God also gives you common sense. And, take your medicine, value your mental health, because mentally, your health is important. And suicide is a mental health issue. It deals with depression. There are a lot of mitigating factors in which nobody wakes up and says, I'm going to commit suicide today. Usually somebody starts with depression, and they wound up, as the stages go further down to depression, they wound up saying, people are going to be better without me being here. And as ultimately, it seems like what Aaron decided, that, maybe his daughter, his family would be better off without him. So he made the ultimate, for lack of a better term, the ultimate sacrifice of killing himself, because I guess he rationalized, and again, speculation, that he could make his family's life better in death than he ever could while he was living. Trey, I'm gonna let you get back in here if you have anything else to add. Guess not. So moving right along, we're going to go to our playoff coverage. Anything surprise anybody during the NBA playoffs? Trey, go ahead.
Not to be honest with you, not really. I think things are going almost like I expected, except for the Bulls Celtics series. I thought the Celtics would. I didn't think they would sweep the Bulls, but I thought the Celtics could do some damage. I thought Isaiah Thomas would step up, in spite of the death of his sister, and do some big things. But so far, that series, if I'm not mistaken, they're up 3-0 now, I think. or maybe they're down 2-1, but I really thought that the Celtics were going to win that series in 5 or 6 games, and as of now, that doesn't seem to be the case. So I mean, to me, that's the biggest surprise there. All the other series, I think, are going like we expected them to. So there's not been many surprises aside from that, the Boston and Chicago series. I may be forgetting another one, but that's what I remember.
To me, the one that's really surprising me, is that Celtics and Bulls. Well, a couple, well, two really. The Celtics and Bulls because I thought like Trey thought that the Celtics would wrap that up in 5 or 6 games. This was obviously pre-death of Isaiah Thomas's sister. But I think now that things are starting to even out, the Bulls lost Rajon Rondo for the rest of the playoffs, and they're proving to be a different team without him leading the way. So now, I think the Celtics will. They won tonight, so that's 2-1. I think they'll wrap it. I think the Celtics will be able to right the ship. Ultimately lose to the next game. So probably, they'll ultimately probably lose to the Bucks or the Raptors. Whoever wins that series, they'll ultimately lose to them. But you have there's the other one too that's surprising me. Like I said, I said last week that the team to watch during the playoffs would be the Jazz, and the Jazz, have a game. I think they'll also play tonight, but they're tied 1-1. And if you would have told me that a Rudy Gobert-less Utah Jazz would be, tied 1-1 in a series against the LA Clippers, I would have said you're crazy that the Clippers without Rudy Gobert would blow the Jazz out. But that's not the case. So I still think the Jazz are surprising people, and I think the Jazz will, that the Jazz will beat the Clippers in 5 or 6 games. No, not probably in 6 games. In 6 games, because the Clippers are, they're a very weak team, and they're lacking depth, especially without Austin Rivers. Austin Rivers is injured. They're lacking depth, so they're about even right now. But I think that, that the Jazz have a little bit more depth than the Clippers. Like I said, ultimately that series is ultimately who's going to lose to the Warriors next round. So that series will decide itself. I think the Bucks too, man. I was watching. I sort of was watching that game, but then I looked and I was all like 50. I think at one point the Bucks were up 40-19 over the Raptors, and that's a series that's surprising me too, because even though I said, the Bucks would, be competitive in that series, they are actually making an argument to win that series, and they're up 3-1 or 2-1 now, and they might actually win that series. Antetokounmpo and that team, I thought that, the fact that this is their first playoffs or second playoffs, but the fact that they're still inexperienced when it comes to the playoffs, that would hurt them, but it's really not. And Thon Maker and others are really showing up and showing out during that series. We'll see. That's it. The Bucks and the Jazz are the two teams that are really surprising me during the playoffs, during this playoff run, and it's interesting to see that it's the younger, it's the opposite of what you would think it would be, where you would have the older teams, locking it in and doing well during the playoffs. But right now you have the young guns really gunning it in the playoffs, beating the older teams, the Bucks, the Jazz. You have all these young teams really showing out in the playoffs, and that's a good thing. That's good for the future of the league and the future health of basketball. I am very, very happy with what I'm seeing from the NBA and the young stars, the Antetokounmpos of the world, and the fact that they're showing out on the national stage. There are a lot of people, me included, who don't really get to watch Milwaukee Bucks games and Utah Jazz games. And we know the main stars. The people that are on that team that do really, really well for the Jazz, Gordon Hayward. And for the Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo. But then you get to see the Thon Makers, the Rodney Hoods, and the other people that are a part of the Jazz that really do well. And a lot of people didn't even realize Joe Johnson was still in the league until the playoffs started. So, it's a great thing to see. Move on unless Trey has anything to add. We're moving on to another playoff thing. This is a question that could have been why maybe we should have these things. This was a question that didn't have an answer until yesterday. But is there a method to Paul George's madness by trashing his teammates? Go ahead, Trey.
Going to a
Trey, you ready? Trey. All right. Wow. Yes, he come back in. I think that up until yesterday, I would have said that sure, there's a method to his madness, but now that I saw the Pacers, I watched the Pacers blow a 20-point lead to the Cavaliers. I'm kind of wondering, is this team really going to live? Really going to be able to live through this series? Because I thought it'd be a competitive series, and it's turning out to be a lot better, than I thought it was. I thought that they'd be able to exploit the weaknesses of a team of excuse me. I thought that they would be able to exploit the weaknesses of the Cavaliers. And, the Cavaliers' weakness has showed up. Their weakness in defense. And we talked about this. We talked about this last week when we said that this is the weakest Cavaliers team. I thought that LeBron was a part of, but then yesterday he goes off for near 40 points and brings his team back from a 20-point deficit. Something that nobody ever does, and LeBron James did it. And ultimately, it seems like the secret weapon is this team will go as far as LeBron James will take them. Ultimately, they'll probably go to the finals, and then we'll probably lose to the Warriors, and but it's still yet to be determined. And just seeing that and seeing how seeing how crazy it is right now in that series. I don't think there really is a method to Paul George's madness. I think he should. I know he's trying something different. I know it worked for most of the game yesterday. It was working where Lance Stevenson was playing out of his mind, and there were so many people just doing amazing yesterday for the Pacers, but ultimately LeBron James just checked all that and said, it's my team, get out the way, and he took over, and ultimately that's all that matters. Trey, are you ready to come on?
Yeah. The earphone, my headphones came out. That's why and I hit the mute button. And I was like, what the heck's going on? But that's just the Pacers Cavs series. I'm a little bit surprised at no, let me say I'm not surprised at what LeBron did last night because I mean LeBron does stuff like this all the time. You know, he does MVP like stuff every night. And last night he put up a triple double. I think he got the triple double with like 7 or 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So and he brought his team back from a 26-point deficit or so, and ended up winning the game by I think 6 points, which says something about LeBron and the Cavs, and it also says something about the Pacers. I think maybe we overestimated what the Pacers were. I think Paul George is a great player, he proved that last night. He put up a triple double as well, and I think that as a team, the Pacers are a solid team. But okay, you got Paul George, and then who else do you have on that team? Monte Ellis, Jeff Teague. Jeff Teague's a good player, but he's not what he used to be when he was in Atlanta. And then you've got Miles Turner, a young star in Miles Turner. But I mean, compared to the Cavs, at least last night and the games before last night, the Pacers have not been. They really have not. I mean, you had game one where that was a tight one, and then the last night, it looked like the Pacers kind of were turning things around and were going to right the ship, and then they come back from a 26-point deficit. And I think what's interesting to note about last night is Kyrie Irving was not on the floor, I believe, for the majority of the second half. I think he came out towards the end of the third quarter and did not go back into the game. So they did that, and I don't believe Kevin Love was on the floor at all. He could have been on the floor at some point throughout the end of the third quarter, maybe sometime in the fourth quarter, but majority of the time it was LeBron James with a collection of bench players. Kyle Korver, J.R. Smith, Channing Frye, those guys, and LeBron balked them back with help and the shooting of his teammates. And on the other end, you saw Paul George do his thing, but for the most part, it wasn't enough. LeBron James and his comrades, the Cavaliers, were not, they were not satisfied with a loss. They wanted to go up 3-0 and have an opportunity to tomorrow night put the series away and sweep the Pacers. And clearly, I mean, a lot of times, to me, when there's a team that's up, 26, when they're not really big and they're blowing a team out by 20 plus points, in my opinion, what happens is the team, and this goes for all sports. We saw it in the Super Bowl. Teams kind of, they take a back seat. They slow the pace down and they don't keep up their intensity. And you can't do that against LeBron James and the Cavs. Like, they're not going to take a back seat. They're not going to just sit down and lose like that. And we saw it in the Super Bowl with the Falcons. They did the same thing. They got away from what was their thing the whole year, which was running the ball, and started passing the ball when they should have been running the ball, and they ended up blowing a 28-point lead. Same case with the Pacers. I didn't watch the whole game, but it seemed like they could not get their offense going. They didn't play good defense. The Cavs offense was able to stretch them wide on the 3-point line, and the Cavs were able to close that deficit and ended up winning by 6 points. I mean, think about that. If it was a 26-point game, I think it was 25 at halftime. That's a 31-point turnaround. I mean, that's a lot to make up. 31 points. I mean, you're down by 25 and you end up winning by 6. And I think the Cavs only allowed about 39 points in the second half. And this is a team that we were talking about before the playoffs started. Is not a good defensive team. But when it mattered most, they buckled down and played some defense and came back from a 26-point deficit. Now, I don't think that they can, will this, can the Cavs keep that up, keep going down by 26 and then come back or having these slow starts? No. There's not, but last night it worked. And LeBron James did his thing. Just like he usually does. So, I mean, what is there to say?
True, I mean you gotta give the devil his due. LeBron James, pull the LeBron James. He, as Trey said, he comes up with these miracle performances. He's playing with all the confidence in the world. He brought a championship to Cleveland. So really, there's nothing left for him to do except for win another title. But it's good. It's good that his talent. It's what we say all the time about a LeBron James team. They'll go as far as LeBron James feels like taking them, but eventually, it can't. He can't, as Trey alluded to, they can't continue to lack intensity once they go up 2-0 and expect these teams to roll over. They are the defending champs. They're going to get their team's best shot, and maybe we did overrate the Pacers, but you know what? Next series, when they get the Wizards or the Hawks, will determine for me, because if they play the Wizards, that's a matchup that the Cavaliers struggle with in the regular season. So I will be really, really interested in seeing how that works out for them. But I'm excited for the Cavaliers. I didn't think that they would be bounced in the first round by the Pacers. I thought that series would be more competitive, but yet to be determined. We'll see tomorrow. We're gonna do things a little bit out of order right now. We're gonna break up right now. We've done a lot of basketball, so we're gonna break it up, break up the basketball and go to football a little bit. So it turns out a couple of things with our Eagles, really two big important things. But the main one is Carson Wentz did his interview in which he basically said that he didn't like. And this is what I love about him and players like him. He put everybody on notice on the Eagles front office and in the league that he doesn't like losing, and he didn't like sitting home in January. He said that next year he wants to be in the playoffs and he expects for the Eagles to win the NFC East. Boy, I love the confidence of that kid. But so Trey, the question is. Get into the question before I dive into my soliloquy. Do we need more athletes like Carson Wentz? It says in Philly, but just in general to keep it interesting. Do we need more athletes like Carson Wentz in every sport? Go ahead, Trey.
That's an interesting question. Do we need more athletes like Carson Wentz in sports? Well, I like Carson Wentz. I think he's a great personality. He's got that. What's the word? I don't know. He's from North Dakota, so I don't know. I don't know anybody from North Dakota, but he's a likable guy. He seems to be. From what we saw last year, he had a little bit of a slump, but he seems to be the quarterback of our future. And he definitely has some great promise as a quarterback and as a leader. And so, I guess I'd say, yeah, we do need more athletes like him, but we don't. And what I mean by that is we need more athletes that are more like themselves. So, you have guys, and like in basketball, for example, I'll use LeBron as an example. People, with the exception of, the people the hater, his haters, which everybody's going to have, anybody who has success is going to have haters. But LeBron has always been, For the most part, he's been a likable guy. You know, never been in trouble with the law or that type of thing. And he's always been a what's the right word? I mean, he's always been mature, been a great leader. You know, did what he was supposed to, stayed out of trouble, that type of thing. And so we need more people like that, but to do it as themselves. So, you know, Carson Wentz is going to be a leader and be a likable guy and be, you know, stay out of trouble, but in his own way. So, you know, but because he's Carson Wentz. And I'll use an example of, you know, Fletcher Cox. You know, Fletcher Cox is going to be Fletcher Cox. He's going to do what he does, play, get sacks and you know, run into the backfield and blow up plays and that type of thing, and be that guy off of the field as well. But he's going to do it in his own way and be Fletcher Cox. So, and one way we do need more athletes like Carson Wentz. But from the perspective of individuality, we don't, if that makes any sense.
I'll take this from this perspective. I'll take the opposite perspective on this. We definitely need more athletes like Carson Wentz. We need athletes like that. We need athletes that have that kind of confidence that can come in and say, "Yeah, I was the number 2 pick. I didn't like losing." I like athletes that tell you flat out stuff. I don't like people like I like LeBron James and stuff, but I like the vocal people. I like people who are vocal. You know. I like people that come in and say like Carson Wentz, like Jalil Okafor did when he first started with the Sixers. Was he told he did what Carson Wentz did, except a little bit more vocally. Carson Wentz said, "Listen, I expect the Eagles to, win the NFC East and be a threat in the playoffs now that we got some weapons, right?" And he said it a little bit nicer way. But we need more athletes like that that'll put these, because I'm tired of athletes that just go along to get along and they don't say nothing about, "Oh, I want to win," until they're free agents. Even LeBron James didn't really say anything about winning and rings and stuff. We knew that's what he was about, because he's one of the best players, in the world. But I want people that say it. Yeah, say it. Put the organization on notice. Use your star power to get rings. That's what we need in sports. We need people that, they want the money, but they also want the rings. They want the titles. They want the division titles. They want the conference titles. I need athletes that treat every game like it's a championship game, like Carson Wentz does. Like every game, you're building on the culture. You need athletes like that for the culture. Man, athletes like Carson Wentz, athletes like LeBron James that'll say, "Listen, I want a ring. I don't need people that do it quietly, that machinize behind the scenes," because you have athletes like that. I need people that'll be like, "My contract is up in such and such a time. I expect us to win a championship." You put the organization on notice. But if Carson Wentz didn't do what he did, or hadn't been vocally probably behind the scenes before this press conference telling the Eagles, "Listen, I expect us to win the championship," I don't think that they would have tried. They would have gone out and pursued Alshon Jeffrey. They would have signed Torrey Smith, 2 very, very good top 15 wide receivers in the same season. And it's pointed out to me that the Eagles never do this, where they sign 2 players at the top of their craft at the same position at the same time, all because of Carson Wentz. They didn't even do that for my man Donovan McNabb. Donovan McNabb, you want to talk about somebody that had trash around him all his career? Donovan McNabb is like the poster child for what it's like to have trash around you and overachieve, even though you had trash around. Like, other than Todd Pinkston and James Thrash and Chad Lewis, I can't even name to you any other guy that he was throwing to, or Freddie Mitchell. Any other of the guys he was throwing to, because that's how trash they were. Before they got Brian, that was before they got Brian Westbrook. And I'm happy. That's why we need athletes like that to put pressure owners, on these general managers to use that money that's made off their backs to help get the city and the players some rings. That's what we need. I like that. I like athletes like that. So to answer the question, yeah, we need more athletes like that, not only in the world, but specifically in Philly. We need athletes like that, vocal athletes. I like athletes that take on the persona of their cities. Like, be vocal. Say something. Don't just go along to get along. Say something. I'm going to let you get back in. Go ahead, Trey.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's I do agree with you. Like that, I do like a vocal athlete. And it's funny. The the idea. I mean, I'm not going to go into all of the details about like being vocal, being a vocal athlete, or not being a vocal athlete, or being a vocal athlete but not actually saying something and doing something. An example would be Colin Kaepernick, like what he did, and in the way he was vocal, he made a point without actually really saying anything. But I do like an athlete who's vocal. At the same time, well, let me say this. I do like an athlete who's confident, right? You need confidence, because confidence is what's going to fuel you, and it's going to allow you to be, the best player that you can be. At the same time, there's a point to which your confidence turns into cockiness, and when you become cocky, you think you're holier than thou, you think you're greater than everybody else. A lot of times what happens is your expectations, what you think you should be or what you maybe think you are, don't meet up with what your actual result is on the field or on the court. So it's really about, like, okay, if you're going to be confident and talk this talk, then you got to walk the walk and actually put that out there. So, like, for example, an example of, I don't know, would be somebody saying, like, we're going to win the Super Bowl, yet they're on a team that's, was like 2-14 the year before. And it's like, okay, that's a pretty strong claim. Okay, unless you guys just picked up a bunch of Pro Bowlers on your team, and these guys are just going to magically mesh together. I don't see you guys going from a 2-14 team to a Super Bowl team. But I do think that we need more athletes that are vocal and confident about what they can do on the field. And also, I think we need more athletes not only who are vocal about what they can do on the field in terms of, winning games and putting up numbers. I think we need more athletes who are more vocal about what they can do off the field, in charity and, creating jobs and that type of thing. Now, we haven't seen that really from Carson Wentz yet, but I mean, because he's such a personality that people really like him. And he's an intriguing guy. The same way that Joel Embiid is. I think that,
See this guy?
I don't think he's gonna be anybody other than himself. But I think, and I don't think he's necessarily gonna step outside of himself in terms of who he is. But I do think that we need more athletes like Carson Wentz that are vocal, confident leaders.
Raindrop.
Yeah, man. I just think that we need athletes that are about. I wasn't even thinking about the vocal versus. I was just thinking about athletes that want to build a winning culture. That's what we need. That's what the Eagles have been missing since Donovan left, since Brian Dawkins left, since both Brians left. Brian Dawkins, Brian Westbrook. What we've been missing ultimately since Jim Johnson left is that person that's on the Eagles that's about winning, that's about these rings, that's about that want to go, that want to get the city, the Eagles, their first title. And, they've had titles before there was Super Bowl, and they beat the Raiders and everything, which is great. But Eagles just need to be, there's just something about an athlete that will let you know, listen, I expect to get a ring. And this is what I want y'all to do so I can get a ring. And if we don't get a ring, then I'm leaving. I like athletes that are upfront like that. Not these athletes that make you guess. They say stuff. They say the political stuff like, "I love the city. We never leave the city" and stuff. Listen, man, just be honest, man. You know, if you're honest, the organization can do stuff for you. Ask you, you should receive. Ask for a weapon. Carson Wentz was like, listen, I like Jordan Matthews. Jordan Matthews is a great player, but I need more help out here as far as wide receivers. And he got it, you know. So, and they'll get a running back during the draft and everything. You know, we're about to get to that. But I like vocal athletes because vocal athletes, people that are vocal get what they want. That's essentially what it is. You know, I know that there are athletes that are vocal behind the scenes and going over what Trey said on there like this. We don't not only need more vocal athletes, we need more athletes that are about that life when it comes to social justice too. Athletes that are about, I'm not just talking about racial issues like Colin Kaepernick, but because everybody's not cut out for that. But find your niche, man. You know, and that's what athletes need to do. They need to find their place, man. You know, they need to find their place where they fit in, and they need to be politically active and socially active when it comes to these things. You know, gone are the days where you could just be about this life on the floor and have a private life. You know, social media has basically made that non-existent. So use your platform for something, stand for something. You know, also win your championships, win your rings, but stand for something. So we're gonna move on to another Eagles story before we get back to basketball and run through these topics. It came out that the Eagles, you know, even though they had permission from Jeff Lurie to draft him, you know, that Joe Mixon is off the board for the Philadelphia Eagles. So Trey, twofold question. You know, would you draft Joe Mixon? And how do you feel about the Eagles possibly having somebody who has a history of domestic abuse on the team that you root for? Go ahead, Trey.
You're my mom.
Joe Mix the Joe Mixon question is a conundrum because you know you've got people who are like he does not deserve to be drafted. He's an abuser, whatever. He should be in prison. And then there are those who believe, yeah, okay, he did something wrong, but he deserves a second chance. The talent is there. And I tend to be somewhere in the middle. I do believe he was wrong for the way he reacted in the situation, regardless of whether or not the woman spit on him or actually put her hands on him. He should never have responded in that way. On the other hand, he has made it clear that he is, sorry for the way that things went down multiple times, and he has been going around to, he was doing community service stuff, and he had been going around to schools, talking about the issue of domestic abuse, or not necessarily domestic abuse, but just, the issue of abuse. And
that is so lit. Oh my god.
So to me, I think,
I'm so happy I got this gun.
He deserves to have the second chance to be able to go in the NFL and prove that he can play in the NFL, but not only that, but not that he is not that moment doesn't necessarily define him. I think that happened 3 years ago, so he's 3 years older now. He's more mature. But as to the Eagles drafting him, I wouldn't be opposed to the Eagles drafting him. This idea that someone has done something wrong and so we shouldn't draft him, is stupid. As much as people hated Michael Vick for what he did with the dogfighting, people loved him when he was on the Eagles after he started, winning games and playing like old Mike Vick. Adrian Peterson is still Adrian Peterson. He's been injury prone, but I mean, he came back after the whole situation with his son, and he was still Adrian Peterson.
What is saying?
You know, so this idea that because he did something wrong, he should no longer, you know, he doesn't deserve to be in the NFL. And that whole idea, I think that's silly, especially because it's 3 years ago, and he's clearly kind of distanced himself from that, who he was in that moment. So as to the Eagles drafting him, I don't have a problem with the Eagles drafting him. I don't want them to draft him. I do not want that to be their first pick, because I don't think he's a first-round talent. But the thing is, okay, so let's say the Eagles are like, Joe Mixon's our guy. I know that that's not the case. Let's say that they said that Joe Mixon was their guy, right? And they wanted to draft Joe Mixon. That means that they would have gone DB in the first round, most likely, and taken Joe Mixon in the second round, which is not what we wanted to do. Now that Joe Mixon is off the board and is all, you know, he's no longer a viable draft option, you know, unless things go awry and we end up having to take him, which I don't see that happening. You know, that's not on the table anymore. So it's really between Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, or, you know, Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, OJ Howard, or, you know, a DB. You know, I don't know. I haven't really read up on, you know, I don't know if they even gave any reasoning why they took him off the draft board. But I would have to say that some of it had to do with, you know, the situation that happened, you know, 3 years ago, and probably some of the backlash that that they would hear from some people. But you know, like I was saying, like I think that stuff like that, to me, unless there's blatant, like it's a blatant situation where the person shows no remorse. Like to me, it doesn't make sense, you know, to be like, you know, this person doesn't deserve to play, or that somehow, you know, maybe the backlash that you'll receive, you know, for drafting this player is not worth what his talent might be, and the fact that, you know, what he's done is behind him.
Okay.
That's true. That's true. Oh, hey Matt. We're on Joe Mixon. And would you be cheering? What was it? How do you feel about Joe Mixon? The Eagles drafted Joe Mixon. With all his history of domestic abuse and all that, and then you know, would you? How would you feel if he wound up on the Eagles? That's the question on the floor right now, and I'll answer to give you some time. You know, Joe Mixon, sort of like Aaron Hernandez, when we talked about him, to a lesser extent, because you know he hasn't actually killed anybody or committed, you know, abuse and domestic abuse is a very, very horrible issue. But you know, you have people like Joe Mixon who make grave mistakes or errors in judgment. Beating up a woman, never something that you should do as a man. You should never beat up a woman for anything that they do. And you know, you have this where you know he's learning the lesson that Ray Rice had to learn, and other people before him, that you know you just don't embarrass. Not only do you not don't do the you know don't do the crime if you're not ready to do the time, but don't also embarrass the league at the same time. Like you know you have people that do stupid things that embarrass the league, and you know their punishment is only because they embarrass the league. And you know, even though Joe Mixon wasn't in the league yet when he committed this crime, he's embarrassing because it's yet another year we have to talk about domestic abuse in the NFL. And then we gotta bring up Ray Rice. Then we'll bring up Greg Hardy and all the other abusers and criminals who the NFL has decided to let play because, you know, in the NFL, talent outweighs morality. So, you know, and how do I feel about Joe Mixon? Like I said, I feel like he made a very, very bad error in judgment by hitting that girl, spitting on that girl, whatever he did to that girl. And, it would be hypocritical of me to say, you know, to say otherwise. Does he deserve a chance? I mean, listen, there's something that came out about another girl that he beat up. Uh, After we see what happens with that, then maybe I think about drafting him, but you don't know, especially somebody with an active case. Generally, most of these people that come in the league or that are on the team and they do something, they're generally, it's generally done during the summer or in the off season, not during, the season, which will most likely be when his trial would start and everything. So, I'm fully for the Eagles if they want to draft him. I may not like what he did and everything. If they fully want to draft him, then draft him. But obviously, as Trace said, don't draft him unless, and I hate saying this because of our current office in our current person in the White House, but clear option. Take the best candidate. Take the best candidate, and don't just draft on needs. Draft on talent. And really, there's only really three talented running backs: Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, and Leonard Fournette. And if your name's not one of them, then you're in the second or third round. So you have all that, and that's where I am on it. It'd be a little weird, but would I boycott Eagles games and stop watching them? Nah, probably not. But it is a serious issue that you're beating up women, and the worst thing you get is a slap on the wrist jail sentence because you have money. Go ahead, Matt. I'll let you jump in.
Okay, for starters, put it this way: as I'm looking and thinking about this issue, as far as draftability and everything else and character, I make it clear when I say this. I personally would not draft because of character. I would not do it. Will I get a backlash? Possibly. Will people boycott my games? Possibly. But your goal and the draft is to make sure that you got the best people. You draft the best people for your team. That's number one. And if he is the best man for the job, and he can hold himself to a standard in which the team's mission and everything else, is, go for it. I mean, amid the fact that he's committed such crimes and whatever, I'll say it last week. I said it again. This is the NFL, okay, the National Felons League, okay, and there's a lot of them. The question remains here is, will if he's in the right is your team the right environment to have him to where it's like, this you have to hold yourself at this standard, and can the players, the older veteran players, hold him accountable to that standard? Mentoring, that's very important. That's another very important facet of it all. And when you have those factors put in place, I mean, because you want a person to succeed in your organization. If he's the person, if he can succeed in your organization, not just as a player, but as a man off the field, it's worth a risk. But you have to have, and I think, in my opinion, you have to have the right program, that best fits that your team. If it doesn't fit your team, then don't draft him. If it doesn't fit what you need, don't draft him. I don't think that is. I believe that you as a man, you have to work. I don't care what it is, but you have to work. I don't believe in the fact that I almost say entitled that you did this so you're not allowed to work or you're not allowed to do whatever. You need to provide some type of income for yourself as a man, and if you can't do that for yourself, then you can't live life. You can't operate you know a normal life because you have this hanging over your head or you can't take care of what you need to take care of as a man. So with that being said, you know, if this is the Eagles as far as concerned, is it the right fit for him and your organization? Honestly, I personally don't know as far as the inner workings of it all. Honestly, I don't think it could work, but I don't think it would work. But it'll be interesting to see what the Eagles do. It is a high risk, high reward pick, and whoever picks him, just be ready for the backlash that's gonna come. I mean, I feel for the victims of domestic violence and everything else, but to go as far as this person is not allowed to live a life is extreme, in my opinion. However, at the same time, I think he for himself has to understand the damage that he's caused for not only himself but in his draft stock, but for others that's been affected by this. So it'll take a lot for him to. It'll take some time for him to understand the magnitude in which he himself has put himself in. So with that being said, it is a high risk, high reward move, but at the same time, he whoever takes him, just be ready for hell to pay.
All right, I'm gonna close out. I'm gonna close this topic out like this, right? I think we all three of us feel for anyone who suffers from domestic violence anyway, whether that be from a football player or a non-football player. Uh, and but I think that once you commit domestic violence, whether that be at the college level, the high school level, whatever is done at, I think that this should be a new rule adopted by all athletic leagues. And this is something the fellas can think about with me or not. And we can save it for next week when we teaser when we possibly do the live, all these shows are live. But next week, we should be able to do a for real live show next weekend. And the fellas know why. We'll get into that at the end of the show. Tell y'all about the live show, the actual, like I said, all these podcasts are live. They happen in real time. But I think that whatever the domestic violence is, that you should, whether you're a basketball player, soccer player, baseball player, football player, softball player, tennis player, golf player, whatever, lacrosse player, whatever, rugby player, I think that you should automatically, not a suspension, not anything else, but automatically you should take however long you need, but recommend it. Take a year off from your sport. Not saying that you don't train, not saying that you don't do anything else, but take a year off uh, to really think about what you did, depending on what it is, because domestic violence has a lot of different things. There's verbal, there's everything else. There's more than just physical. Uh, you take a year off to really contemplate what you did, what you're going to do to solve it. You don't put any team in a bad position to draft you or sign you as a free agent. This is actually what I commend Ray Rice for, as always, as he's taking time off from the league and still continues to do stuff for the league, for the NFL, for their domestic violence. He's offered to mentor Joe Mixon and help him out and stuff like that, whether he gets drafted or not. So I think that what any athlete should do if they suffer from domestic violence is take a year off from your respective sport. Actually think about what you did. Think about what you're going to do to solve it, what you're going to do to make domestic violence, decrease domestic violence in this world, make it obsolete. How you're going to use your platform for that. I think that would be a good idea. Just take a year off. Doesn't matter what the field of what the level is. I know because of college or high school, you only really have a finite amount of time for it. But still, take a year off. For levels like that where your scholarship and your money depends on it, probably a month. But for everything else, a year, a couple months, just a couple of months to a year to really get your mind, really get out of that vision of an athlete and really just work on yourself as a person, as a man or woman who commits domestic abuse. That's what I think. That's what I definitely think they should do. As far as the Joe Mixon situation, a talented player, but he's just made some stupid decisions. And that's just like Aaron Hernandez, all the talent in the world, but stupid decision making. We're gonna have Matt's baseball update, and then we'll get into some more basketball. So go ahead, Matt.
Okay. Well, my phone sounds like a yeah. As far as baseball is concerned, right now, I know it's like early, about almost like 3 weeks in. Well, right now the Phillies right now, and you start with number one. I didn't expect Clay Buchholz to be done for 4 to 6 months, so I think I'm rolling him out in the $13 million waste, in my opinion. But that's kind of work out because Zach Eflin comes back up, and we'll see what he does long term. So I think the hitting's getting better, but the only problem is with the Phillies right now is the fact that they have a hard time holding leads, and we are seeing this. So that's my biggest concern right now. Get a lead, hold the lead, and don't give it up. This team I think, is too talented to do that, but at the same time, they're young. So as far as that's concerned, that's my only problem right now. It's like this team can hold its own with the Nats of the world. I don't know about the Mets right now. The Mets been owning them right now, but when I last checked, the Braves were down. The Phillies were beating the Braves 4-3 last time I checked. But I really don't expect. I really expect this team to really get better as far as their bullpen is concerned with holding leads. Velasquez pitched very well, but again, this is what happens giving up leads. So they're playing one time and they're playing as expected, but I think this team can do a little better on that end. So that's where my biggest concern is right now. And it's only April. It's only April. You can't, like you always say, we can't win a World Series in April. So we'll see what happens for the rest of the week. And I know Pat Neshek, he's out for paternity leave, family leave. So they brought in Ben Lively from AAA. So we're starting to see a lot of the young guys coming up a little earlier, bit by bit. So all systems still go. So, Calvin, take it from here.
All right, moving right along. We're gonna go to the some more playoff stuff. So did you guys? I know Matt hasn't really been paying attention to the playoffs. But did you guys enjoy another Russell Westbrook question? Did you guys enjoy watching? And this is my name for him. Nobody else is there. Chill Westbrook jack up 43 shots the other night. We'll start with Trey. Go ahead, Trey.
Well, I didn't watch the game myself, but 43 shots, geez. That's a whole lot of shots. And if I'm not mistaken, he put up something like 50 points with the triple-double or whatever. So, I mean,
25 minutes until the best cake that is ever made.
he put up 50 points, so it's like, okay, he put up more points than shots he took. So that's cool. But at the same time, like, I don't know. 43 shots is a lot. Like, that's about half on a regular basis. NBA teams usually take about 90 shots a game. And for him to take 43, that's close to half of what a team normally would take. So I mean, I'm not the type of person that really cares how much shots a player takes. Unless it's hurting his team. And I don't know if you can say that it was hurting his team necessarily last night, but it didn't lead to a win. So, if 43 shots work out and your team wins, hey, who am I to say that you took too many shots? But 43 shots and your team loses, great, you put up a triple-double, but maybe you probably turn the ball over 6 times, and your team ended up losing. And now they're in a hole where likely where it's very rare for a team to come out of. So, and I think it's 10:47 right now. So I think that the Thunder game just started. So we'll see what goes on with that series and how things play out. But 43 shots is a whole lot to be taking, especially when your team is losing. And I think. Maybe he feels like, he has to be Mr. Everything. But maybe the case is that maybe he doesn't have to be Mr. Everything. And, he can still put up those triple doubles without taking, 50 shots and facilitate more to his teammates and allow, and I don't know, maybe that has to do with coaching. Maybe that's, maybe that's just what Russell Westbrook will be for the rest of his career. I don't know.
43 shots. You are the Oklahoma City Thunder. Russell Westbrook jacking up 43 shots. Question is, does it help your team? And you jack up 43 shots and you still lose. In my view, you can accuse or make the argument of he's taking too many shots. But the bottom line is, does jacking up 40 some odd shots help your team any? So I think it could be the fact that he's evolving into a scorer. You could look at it as if he's being selfish, ball hog, whatever you want. But somebody jacks up 43 shots. I question. You better make half that and get back and get to the free throw line often. So you should be knocking down 60 points. 60, damn near 70. But, you jack up 40 some odd shots and you lose. It's a problem. It's a big problem. Theoretically, you could be overcompensating. You could be, or not. But as far as I'm concerned, that's a lot of shots to take. And, but at the same time, was that offense built for him to take 43 shots? I don't think so. But can that offense rebound enough and handle the duties of him jacking up 43 shots, 40 some odd shots? So, with that being said, I'm going to tell you right now, if it was jack him up, let him. But if it's part of the plan, okay, fine. If it's not, man, I want to reevaluate that idea. So, yeah.
43 shots. That's as Matt and Trey said, that is a lot of shots to take, especially as we know on Tuesday was in a losing effort. They but that's what brought the Thunder to the playoffs this year. That's the difference, man. And no Kevin Durant. Somebody got to take the shots. As Allen Iverson said, this is no knock on Allen Iverson. This is a real quote. Got it from Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith said that Allen Iverson told him that if they passed him back the ball, that meant nobody else wanted to shoot, so he had to shoot. And so maybe that's how Russell Westbrook lives that maybe that's Russell Westbrook's motto every time he steps onto the floor. That nobody else wants to take a shot, I'll take it. Whether that be 43, 50, whatever it takes, man. He did, as Trey said, 51 points. I think like 12 and 13 rebounds and like 12 assists as well. But it was a losing effort, and the game is still yet to be determined. Right now the Thunder are up 65-58 on Houston. That's still, like I said, yet to be determined. But when Russell Westbrook, I think the Thunder are better when Russell Westbrook doesn't play hero ball. Now, towards the end of that game, because once I got back from Bible study and meetings, I was able to watch the final like 2 quarters of that game, half the third and most of the fourth. Oh no, that was Tuesday. Never mind. I was able to watch most of that game. He jacked up a heck of a lot of shots, especially towards the end when he was on the bench and they were up by 20. And then James Harden just went off without him on the floor. So I think he doesn't really trust his teammates because he doesn't really have. Goes back to what I said earlier, and Matt wasn't here, so I'll say it again. Russell Westbrook really doesn't have anybody consistent because his. I'm trying. I don't want to say any kind of blasphemy because even though I love Allen Iverson and Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, although they could be guns at times, but Russell Westbrook, I like to call him the ultimate gun because there's no guarantee once he brings that ball up the floor and he won't jack up a shot and you'll never get a chance and you'll never get an attempt. So Russell Westbrook, great player, but just his ways and the way he plays turns people off. That's what led to Kevin Durant leaving. Kevin Durant got tired of standing there and just watching Russell Westbrook bring it, because this is what happened last year. This has happened this year too. Russell Westbrook will bring the ball up to the court. He'll sit there. He may got a teammate. He may can swing it around and then get the ball back and take a better shot. Nah, he'll take it. He'll take a very, very well contested 3-point shot and miss it most of the time. He did that a lot during the game on Tuesday, the previous game, just jacking up threes, taking bad shots, being double teamed. Patrick Beverly forced him to take a bad shot, take it anyway. That's what brought Russell Westbrook to the game. That's what most people love about him, and what some people hate about him is the fact that he's a gun. He turns the ball over. He's got a lot of faults, but he's a good player. And if it wasn't for him, the Thunder would be a lottery team. That's the true story. The true fact of the matter is that even though we laugh and we joke around, we say that Russell Westbrook's a gun. The fact of the matter is that if it wasn't for Russell Westbrook being a gun, the Thunder would probably be the Oklahoma City Kings. They probably have a worse record than the Kings if it wasn't for Russell Westbrook being on that team. And now they're a playoff team. They have a chance to at least win one game and not get swept by the Rockets. So, do I enjoy watching somebody take 43 shots and a good portion of them, especially towards the end of the game, ugly shots? No, But ultimately, the Thunder really are in a bad position because the reason they're in this position is because they traded away pieces and they let pieces go in free agency. So, it is what it is. This is the Thunder's bed, and they have to lie in it. Matt and Tram, I'll let y'all get back in here, and then we can move on to our next topic. If you got any.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just like taking, there's tons of players that that still do take a lot of shots and used to take a lot of shots. Excuse me. Allen Iverson took a lot of shots. Kobe took a lot of shots. So there's a lot of players that take a lot of shots. But it depends what you do with those shots. And like I was saying, when you think about Russell Westbrook taking 43 shots, I don't know how many shots the team took, but usually on like I said, NBA teams take about 90 shots, and so they're approximately gonna make about half of those. So Russell Westbrook took as many shots as probably I don't know how many shots his team made last night. Let's say they made close to 60 field goals. They probably took closer to they probably took maybe just over 100 or just under 100 shots. But that means he made, I mean that's a lot of shots to be taking. And if let's say he took 43 shots and they made 60, I mean I don't know how many shots he made, but that's a whole lot of offense. That's a whole lot of shot taking that's solely on Russell Westbrook. Now he's not taking 42 shots every night, but I mean he is probably averaging around 22, 23 shots a night, which can work, but clearly, as like I was saying earlier about Russell Westbrook, it's all about these type of things, these stats and putting up numbers and taking a lot of shots. It all depends on what the final outcome is. And as of now, I mean, with the exception of right now, I mean, literally right now, they're winning. They're beating the Rockets, but it all comes down to wins.
Yep. That's what it ultimately comes down to. Wins. Postseason wins. All right, next topic. Are the Celtics the weakest number one seed in playoff history? Matt, go ahead. Matt? All right, we'll come back. Go ahead, Trey.
The Celtics. Oh wow. Potentially, yeah. Maybe the weakest. Um, and like I said, like we both said earlier, I mean, I was very surprised. I mean, any team with D Wade on it and Jimmy Butler is a good team, and they're gonna put a fight up. They're not in that team. But I did not expect them to go up 2-0 on the Celtics like that. And even after the death of Isaiah Thomas's sister, I thought that he would be able to overcome or not necessarily overcome the emotions, but I'll use it, allow his emotions to flow into the game, and that he would be able to play like his normal self. And kind of do the whole I'm playing for my sister, or I'm playing for this loved one, that type of thing. And so far that hasn't really happened. I mean, he did have a valiant effort on on Easter. He played very well, and things and unfortunately they didn't come out with the win. But It's I mean, as far as I know, this could potentially be the weakest. But I mean, and it's rare that an 8 seed beats a 1 seed. Um, I think the last time it happened maybe was 10 or 11 years ago. I think probably even further back than that, and I can't remember what two teams it was. But another example of this actually was the Celtics and Bulls back in 2011, I think. And if I'm not mistaken, it was a 1 versus 8 seed, and I believe um, the Bulls were the 8 seed. I think I could be wrong, or it might be the other way around. The Celtics were the 8 seed, and the Bulls were the first 1 seed. Um, and that went to 7 games. Um, but it's rare that an 8 seed will do enough damage to actually go and beat a 1 seed. So this could potentially be the weakest first seed. Um, but I think if you're thinking about weak 8 seeds, I think you have to put in perspective how weak the entire Eastern Conference was. This is a very weak Eastern Conference. The Cavs, you kind of expect the Cavs every year to dominate, or whatever team LeBron James is on to dominate, and they didn't really do that this year, at least in the second half of the season. um, the Celtics played well, but I mean they only won 52 games or 53 games, and in comparison to the top teams in the West, that's 10 games or so behind. I think 10 or 11 games behind the Warriors, and another 9 or so behind the Spurs, and I think another 4 or 5 behind the Rockets. So in the West, the Celtics are a 5 or 6 seed, whereas in the East they're a 1 seed. Also, you have to think about um, I mean it's just odd. The Eastern Conference was unusually weak this year. The Wizards were a team that you thought might be able to go and get that 1 seed. They were on that. They had that really long winning streak, and then the winning streak ended. I think John Wall got hurt, and so things kind of tailed off towards the end of the season. They didn't impress as much as we thought maybe the Wizards would be able to do, and really push for maybe that 1 or 2 seed. So things were just odd in the East in terms of um, teams that were supposed to dominate. I mean, the Raptors didn't really do much after the loss of Kyle Lowry and the addition of Serge Ibaka. So I mean, in my opinion, I think it's a very subjective thing, whether you say this is the weakest 1 seed or not. But I think if you're going to say that the Celtics are the weakest 1 seed, maybe you say that I would say that maybe this is the weakest Eastern Conference, the weakest 8 teams, um, maybe in history, in terms of the Eastern Conference.
All right, we're gonna try this again. Matt, you there? Guess not. All right. So I think that uh, this is not the weakest number 1 seed that I've seen in basketball. The weakest would be of the 1 seeds. Like it's not even the weakest 1 seed in history because right now the weakest 1 seed is the team I brought up earlier. That team that had that high-powered Dallas Maverick team that I think happened. That was actually the last number 1 seed to lose to an 8 seed. That was in the early aughts, in the early 2000s. That Dirk Nowitzki had a high-powered number one overall team, like the best number one seed in the NBA, was that Dallas Mavericks team who lost to the Davises, Baron and Steven, and the Golden State Warriors. So does that Mavericks team in 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003 compare to this 2016, 2017, uh, you know, uh, Celtics team? And I think that the Celtics team, because I think that, you know, that the death of Isaiah Thomas's sister, even though they wound up winning today, right? The death of Isaiah Thomas's sister, I think, really threw that team off. And because Isaiah Thomas is the best player on that team, the best player on that team, they feed off of their star player. And because of him going through, this unfortunate death of his sister in a one-car accident, that, this team is out of sync. And now, Rondo is gone for the rest of the playoffs. So like I said earlier, it's kind of evened out this playoff series. So are they the weakest number one seed? As Trey said, that is highly subjective. But take it from the fact of, the rankings, offensively, the Celtics had like the fourth best offense in all the NBA after the Warriors, Cavs, and Spurs in that order. And, they are a pretty good defensive team and everything. And, they are a good team. Like, even though they would be a fifth or sixth seed in the West, they still are a good team. They're a top 5, top 6 team, right? So the fact that they're now losing 2-1 to the Bulls is kind of a shocker. But, this has been, even using the NBA, this has just been a weird season and year in basketball. I mean, they had UConn going down to Mississippi State of all schools. You had so much just basketball. Now this is just overall basketball. You got the redemption thing going on with UNC winning a title after a heartbreaking loss. South Carolina winning its first basketball tournament. And then you got the Celtics, who are a good number one seed. This was a weird overall season. This was a weird NBA season where, we have a really weak team that won a ring and is going in as a very weak defending champions. The strongest team is actually the team that, really didn't do much other than that Kevin Durant, and they're actually a better team. That'd be the Warriors, and everybody else is just really meandering and is very weak. The Spurs are really the only competition. So, I mean, if you're going to say that, I do agree with Trey, but, we got to give credit and be fair here. It was a weak NBA season all around for everybody not named the Warriors. So, they're all, a weak team. But to the point of the question, the crux of the argument, I don't think this is the weakest team, the weakest number one seed. But I definitely think this might be the weakest playoff team the Celtics have ever had. I do think that. But like Trey said, that's all subjective. Trey, I'll let you get back in, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I didn't have anything else to add aside from the fact that, this was a weak year. I wouldn't say so much for the West in particular, but mostly it was a weak year for the Eastern Conference in general, and for the 8 teams that are in the playoffs now. And then you also had the play-in. You also had to put into context, the death of his Isaiah Thomas' sister, and how that affected the whole entire Celtics team. And because he is the best player on the team, And even if you don't agree with the fact that he's the best player on the team, he is kind of the heart and soul of that team. He's kind of like the Energizer Bunny. He does everything. Um, and yeah, so I mean his grieving really probably affected, and well, it not probably, but it did affect the rest of the team. And I think, like you said, with Rajon Rondo out, I think that'll even things out. And I think as the series moves along, I think the Celtics will return back to what they were, um, which was actually a very very good team. They could do some damage in the playoffs, but so as of now, maybe they are the weakest, and like we were saying, it's very subjective. But I think as the playoffs move along, we'll see the Celtics kind of step back into form.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. So moving right along to our final couple of questions. I really wish the whatever Matt's technical difficulties or whatever happened with that, he wouldn't have left because we're going to talk about his favorite dumpster fire, or his second favorite dumpster fire. The New York Knicks. I guess we sort of, correct me if I'm wrong, Trey. Did we sort of cover this last week? I don't know. Maybe we glossed over it. But uh, you know, uh, and if I forget and Trey reminds me, I apologize. I am a little tired. But there are the Phil Jackson. He didn't say anything this week, but this is part two of our discussion. Oh yeah, we did talk about it because I do remember that. He backed up, and I also just wrote an article on it. But he basically ran. Let me see, we're on the East Coast. He basically ran Carmelo Anthony over with a Amtrak Acela train, then backed the train up and ran Carmelo Anthony over again with it. So back to this, Trey. Yeah, you had a week to think about it. So what do you think about? So the question is, who's leaving New York first, Melo or Phil? Go ahead, Trey.
That's a good question. We did kind of talk about this, not this specific question, but we did talk about um, Phil Jackson and the situation in New York. But who's leaving first? Oh, wow. Um, well, I think just based on the situation with Carmelo Anthony's contracts and the fact that he has the no trade clause, um, in my opinion, it would be Phil Jackson, just because you can fire a coach or a GM at any time. Um, so I guess Phil Jackson is like, he's based on the context of the situation in New York, he's the most disposable. Um, and I really do think that Carmelo really would like to stay in New York. However, I think it would behoove Carmelo Anthony to be the first one out, actually, and to let go of that no trade clause, and hopefully he can work something out where he gets traded somewhere where he wants to play, and has an opportunity to win a championship before you know, before his athleticism starts to slip, and his game is no longer what it is now. Um, so I mean, to me, I think it'd be best for Carmelo if he were the first one out. Um, And if he's not the first one out, who knows what happens next? Who they put in position, to replace Phil Jackson. Um, the only thing I can say is that if Carmelo, I think this is the only way it works out in Carmelo Anthony's favor, in New York, is that if whoever they put in place after Phil Jackson is someone that Carmelo Anthony, is on the same page with. But that's the thing is that in New York they're in a rebuilding stage. Um, so if Carmelo thinks he can wait another 5 years to finish a rebuilding process, and then another 2 years or 3 years before they can actually win a championship, then hey, go for it. But I don't think Carmelo has 8 years. So I think it's best that Carmelo Anthony be out of New York and find another place like Chicago or I don't know, Cleveland or wherever the case may be, um, to to go and win a championship. I mean, that's his best option, and I think that he should be out first.
I think that it would behoove. I agree with Trey. I think it would behoove Bello to be the first one out, just because of the points that he so eloquently put down, as well. And I also think, I was firmly in the, Carmelo should leave, uh, you know, not stay. I know he likes the money and everything, but now, his personal life has come out again, and now he's on his way to having, a divorce with Lala, and that basically just strengthens my argument as to why he should leave, go get a fresh start, whether that be going to the Clippers, going to the Spurs, going to Chicago, maybe even making Trey happy and blessing Trey's heart and going to Miami to play with Hassan and Goran Dragic. Just go somewhere that's not New York, man. I know that you like the money and everything, but you can go to LA. LA is I've never been to LA, but from what I hear, LA is like the Western New York, much better, much easier. I've been to California, much more easygoing. Just go to LA. Go play with the Clippers, man. Go to Chicago. Go to Miami. Do something else, man. It's not working. Phil Jackson doesn't want you there. He's using you. I just at what point, Carmelo? I know you probably don't listen to this podcast. It's a small podcast, but at what point do you get tired of wasting your years? Now you've been in New York since 2011, 6 years, Melo, and all they've shown you is they respected you when you was getting them in the playoffs. But ever since Phil Jackson came onto the scene, the New York team that you've been a part of has been gradually getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And he thinks that getting rid of you will heal all the wounds, but you can't. Your talent can only cover up the fact that Phil Jackson is a horrible GM/president of basketball operations, man. Because once you leave, then he's fully unmasked. I would leave just to be petty, man. Because once you leave, then people will find out that it wasn't you, it was him. You don't make front office decisions. You don't cut checks. He does. He was supposed to get you better players for 6 years. He didn't get you better players for 6 years. I know you like your money, Carmelo. Who doesn't? That's the only reason you went to New York. You like your money. You had a chance to go to Chicago and win titles. But listen, man, you got to be the first, man. I know that you may think that James Dolan will wake up and realize how valuable you are, Melo, but listen, man, it's James Dolan. He's like the Dan Snyder of the NBA. He doesn't realize much. You just got to leave and let Phil Jackson run the Knicks into the ground and then get fired and you get your ring. That's what you need to do. Just leave, Melo. Just leave. All right, so we're gonna move on unless Trey has anything else to wrap it up with. But I'll move on to our final question, which really credit to First Take and Molly Karam for this one, because this was her hot take about Kawhi Leonard. So the question on the floor is, will Kawhi Leonard end up being the next LeBron James, the next LeBron James type superstar in the league? Go ahead, Trey.
Kawhi Leonard, man. I'm a big fan of Kawhi Leonard, man. And it's funny to think about. If you go back to the series, the first Cleveland versus San Antonio series in 2000, I guess that was 2013-14 season. Kawhi Leonard actually missed two free throws, two or three crucial free throws that ended up being the nail in the Spurs coffin, and it ended up being the Cleveland Cavaliers, or excuse me, the Miami Heat's ticket to their second championship in a row. Um, and we all remember that game 6 where Ray Allen hit that shot, and then they went up. The game went in overtime. That he won the game, and then they went on to win Game 7 and win the championship. And Kawhi Leonard has come a long way from there. I think if he's not 90%, he's close to 90% free throw shooter. He's consistently, shooting at, between like 35 and 40% from the 3-point line. He's a defensive juggernaut. We call him the Claw. He's this humble monster. And at the same time, we want to consider him the superstar, but at the same time, he plays on the San Antonio Spurs. And we kind of talked about this last week, I think, when we were talking about MVP candidates, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. The fact that Kawhi Leonard being a San Antonio Spur kind of takes away from his superstar aura, I guess you would say. So I mean that's the intrigue about Kawhi Leonard is he's so talented defensively and offensively. He's such an intelligent player, and I think he's taken for granted, to be honest with you. You had a similar player. I mean, well, if you think about, the greatest players, to play for the Spurs, you've got guys like David Robinson, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker. You think about those guys, at least in the Greg Popovich era. I mean, Manu Ginobili, you look at his stats, and his stats don't necessarily say Hall of Famer, but his impact on the game and his contributions to the San Antonio Spurs for championships, is tremendous. But he's taken for granted because his stats didn't say it. Now, Kawhi Leonard, on the other hand, has stats that say superstar, that say all-star, that say, he should be considered as a top 10, maybe top 5 player in the league. But in a system where, Greg Popovich is the coach and people look at him as the result of the team's success, people will take for granted what Kawhi Leonard does for that team. I remember this was a while back. We were talking about how actually when Kawhi Leonard is on the floor, the Spurs actually play worse defense, which is odd, but I don't know where that number is now. But Kawhi Leonard is just such an I like watching him play. In particular, I like watching him play on defense because he just works so hard on defense and hustles and does what he's supposed to do, and he's the Claw. But I don't know. I've always liked Kawhi Leonard. He's never been in trouble. He's a very humble guy, but he's got this sense of confidence when he's on the court that he knows who he is. He knows what he can do, and he's consistently grown every year. He's been in the league. His stats have consistently increased. Points, rebounds, and assists have all gone up. His shooting efficiency has gone up at the 3-point line, mid range, and 3-point shots. So Kawhi Leonard is a great player, but for most people, he's probably taken for granted just because he plays for the Spurs. And and people contribute. They attribute, should I say, the success of the Spurs to the coaching of Greg Popovich rather than, you know, the individual efforts of the players.
All right. Well, let's do this. Let's do this, Joe. I think that I think that Kawhi Leonard can definitely be a superstar in this league. He wouldn't be the first one on the Spurs because they did have Tim Duncan. Even though I know most people don't consider him a superstar, but he was a superstar type player. And you know, uh, Kawhi Leonard, man. Kawhi Leonard has somebody watched him play in college. Kawhi Leonard has made consistent improvement. He's gone from being one the ultimate defensive player on the Spurs, the defensive specialist, to the superstar, their best all around player. He's improved his all around game. He now has a consistent 3-point shot. He's good at outside shots. He still has the defense. He was the defensive player of the year last year. This year, I think that he should get most improved player because just of how much he's improved his scoring. He was one of the few. He was the only MVP candidate of the 4 or 5 candidates to be top 3, not only in points but in rebounding and in block shots. He's always doing something. He does the things. You have players. Kawhi Leonard is a player that keeps you consistently in the game. He's gonna make the plays that's gonna help you win the game, and that's why I think that with more attitude and as he improves, as LeBron James starts waning and as it becomes Steph Curry's league, and the tier after that is Kawhi Leonard's generation. It could be Kawhi Leonard and on the East, Giannis Antetokounmpo's league because they both are similar players, except obviously Antetokounmpo is taller and does a little bit more than Kawhi Leonard. But Kawhi Leonard is a superstar, is the star of this league, is a darling of this league, man. And as Trey said, a lot of people want to give it to Popovich, but you can't take his numbers away, especially this season. Now he's gone under the radar because he plays in the same conference as Harden and Westbrook, but he's right there, 3rd in the league in scoring, tops in rebounding, tops in block shots. He does it all. It used to be, like I said, he was just considered the defensive specialist, but now that it's officially become his team, he's showing that he has the superstar tendencies. Now, will he be as big as LeBron James with the endorsement deal showing up on your TV like every other commercial? Probably not, because he plays in San Antonio, but Tom Brady plays in New England with Bill Belichick. He's one of the most profitable and most recognizable faces on the planet. So it definitely can happen. I know Kawhi Leonard keeps making strides like this, develops a personality, has some interviews, good interviews and everything. Not that he doesn't have personality, but, has good interviews, becomes a face that can be marketed. I definitely think he has the opportunity to be better, to be as good, if not better, of a superstar / ambassador for the league as LeBron James. I think it's all on how you handle it, how he does when it's his team now, but when it fully becomes his team for the next 10 to 15 years. Because I think, and Trey can correct me if I'm wrong, he's only 23, 24, so that means he's got like a good, because most players play until they're at least close to 40. So he has at least another 10 to 14 years of greatness left in him. So, he's just going to be a really good player, and I can't wait to see how it goes because he is a great player. And eventually, I think he will be, to answer the question, I think he will be the next superstar of the league. He'll follow in Tim Duncan's footsteps. He'll be the next superstar in the league. I want to thank you guys for coming. Coming out or watching later. As I said, asking you shall receive. Next week, our church is having a men's retreat. And so we will all, hopefully, God willing, I know Trey and I are going, hopefully Matt is going too, we'll be able to have a live, like as I said, we always do these shows live, but we'll be able to do a same building podcast because for once, for probably the first time in this podcast history, we will all be in the same, not in the same hotel room, but in the same building for a men's retreat for the weekend. And so next week, Friday night, might be a little later because I think the sessions, and Trey can correct me if I'm wrong, will probably at this time or at the time of our podcast be wrapping up a closing session and headed to snack time. So it might be a little bit later, probably like 9:30, 10 o'clock, but definitely stay tuned for episode 29. Guys, we're at 28 episodes. We're just wrapping up 28 episodes. We ended at 11:30, actually on time. It's rare, and Trey can tell you it's rare that this happens where we start on a Friday and actually end on a Friday. Usually we're ending on a Saturday. But it's great. It's great to have you guys. Thank you for supporting the podcast. Whether you listen, when we're live or listen after. Thank you for your support. Have a good weekend. Like I said, look forward to the episode 29. It'll be a Same Builder podcast. Maybe Trey will let us be live and be on camera because we'll be in the same building, but we'll see. Not gonna push it, but thank you all so much for listening. Have a good and safe weekend. Enjoy your wet Friday night if you're on the East Coast. Enjoy, man. Have a good weekend. Deuces.